G'day, folks, and welcome to MedTech Trailblazers, where we explore the lives of influential pioneers in our ecosystem who have forged a new path for others to follow. I had the pleasure recently of speaking with Jan Garfinkle, founder and managing partner of Arboretum Ventures, a firm whose whole philosophy is to fund better, faster, cheaper technologies that align with current value-based healthcare initiatives. Join me in this first episode as we go through Jan's remarkable early life and career, where she already demonstrates the dogged persistence that has allowed her to break so many barriers and have a large impact on our ecosystem. From how she got into the business school of her choice to being a key influencer in Eli Lilly's decision to purchase the device companies that eventually became Guidant, to her decision to stand up a venture capital firm in the Midwest, Jan never stopped breaking the mold for what could be possible. Thank you. So, welcome, Jan. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Andrew. So happy to be here with you.
Yeah, we're going to have fun today, so thanks.
I'm looking forward to it.
So why don't we start? Let's start with your formative years. Tell us a little about growing up and your family.
Sure. I grew up in San Francisco. I'm actually born and raised there, and loved growing up in San Francisco. I have one younger brother, and then my mom and dad were there. My dad was an attorney, and my mom was a career guidance counselor for the city of San Francisco. And it was a town at that point, very much like the Midwest, honestly. It was a small city. People were super nice. You could take, public transit with no problem. You could park your car anywhere you wanted, no problem. The homeless situation wasn't bad like it is today. And it was very beautiful. It's a very romantic city. So it was a great place to grow up. And, it was interesting with the flower children and the, Haight-Ashbury and everything. My folks were pretty conservative, so we didn't really participate in all that, but it was fun to be in the city and get, exposure to it.
So tell us a little bit more about your parents and your brother. I've got here, your dad's a corporate attorney, and he played a real important key role in your life.
Yeah, my dad was really probably my first mentor. He cared greatly about his kids. And, whenever we had an issue, he was sort of the one that we went to help solve problems. And, I recall even in high school, I always was getting to school by myself until high school, which is kind of in reverse of normal, I guess. But, and my dad would give me a ride. I went to Lowell High School, which was maybe 2 miles from our house or so. So he would give me a ride part way before he would then go downtown. And I just loved those times being with him because he just, I don't know, he was so compassionate and he just cared so much about what we were going through and wanted to hear from us and was always trying to give us some words of wisdom. And because he was a corporate attorney, he understood the business side really well too. And so as I got into the business world, he was really one of the first people I would talk to about different, things I was struggling with within the business world. And that was always so helpful to have a trusted person to go to who really only cared about me and didn't, he cared about the organization I was with, but more cared about me and wanted to make sure I was going to be okay and helping to make some good decisions by talking with him. So it was a gift to have my dad as my first mentor.
So your mom, you said she left college early only to return and then complete 2 master's degree and get her PhD.
Yeah, my mom was a partier in college. And so my dad is Jewish and my mom is Mormon, which is kind of an odd combination. And my mom moved from Salt Lake to the Bay Area when she was in high school. So she all of a sudden, got exposed to drinking and cigarettes and all those kinds of things. So when she was in college, she, partook of everything and she dropped out of college and she ended up marrying my dad about then. But then she decided she loved to learn and she decided to go back to school and get 2 masters and her PhD. And she graduated with her PhD the same week I graduated from Berkeley with my bioengineering degree. And so that was quite a big week in the Garfinkle family, and it was pretty fun. She was a very funny person and just always loved working and loved learning. So that was her motivation in life to do both.
All right, and then you described your brother John to me as your soulmate.
John is amazing. He and I are really yin and yang. I'm a very, type A personality, very directed, kind of always, knew I was going to, stay on this very strong career path. And John is just the most lovable, kind, compassionate, sweetheart of a person. And there were rough spots in our childhood, and he and I just always had each other to join together to help console each other, whatever the things were. And he ended up going to San Francisco State, and he started in retail and worked in retail for many years, but after a while realized that just was not a very rewarding experience, honestly. And so he ended up becoming a speech pathologist for patients that have traumatic brain injuries, so primarily stroke patients in San Francisco. And he's done that now for 30 years. And he's just, his patients absolutely love him. His friends love him. I mean, if you were to meet him, you would just love him. He's just one of those people that everybody gravitates to because he's kind and he's funny and he's smart. And just the combination is just lovely. And I'm so thankful he's my brother. He truly is my soulmate. He'll be there with me till the bitter end.
Hey, and again, you touched on this just a little moment ago. I thought this was classic. You have to tell us about your first day of kindergarten. How did you get there? First day of kindergarten, not high school, kindergarten.
Yeah. So I was 5 years old because I was Q4 birthday, and my mom and dad had bought their first house. And so they were going to be moving to their first house, but it was after school started. And so we were living in another part of San Francisco, and my mom really, really believed in independence, which has definitely run through my life the entire time. And so she decided that going to the new school, I had to get there, but she was not going to take me. So she put me on Muni on a bus from the little apartment where we were living. I literally was 5 years old, and I was a tiny little kid. I didn't grow until really college, honestly. And so she put me on, I put my money in, and I went to the back of the bus, and she was in a little blue Carmen Ghia with my brother in the car, and they followed me to school. And, I got off the bus and I waved and they left. And that was the only time she ever followed me to school. And the rest of the time I just took Muni by myself every day to and from kindergarten until we moved. And then I walked to and from school by myself, which was about a mile. But my mom was a big believer in, you got to take care of yourself. You got to figure out how to do it yourself. And just, pretty crazy.
A good early lesson that has clearly resonated through your life, particularly when we start touch on independence. Independence and strength, I think, comes through. Another quick story, which I think is very San Francisco. You've been working since 14. And one of your first jobs, you had to describe the Empire Movie Theater, your first day at work.
Yeah. So the house that my mom and dad were moving to was in the West Portal area, which I'm sure everyone who's in San Francisco knows that area. And there's a movie theater there called the Empire Theater. And so my first job there at age 14, I was hired to work the candy stand, selling Milk Duds and whatever. And they didn't really need me in the candy stand that first night. So they told me to go walk through the theater and, just sort of pick up stuff and make sure nobody was doing anything they shouldn't be doing. I'm 14. Okay. And I start going to the movie theater and I don't really know what these movies are. And I walk in and it's an X-rated movie. I don't think they ever show X-rated movies anymore, but they did then. And I'm walking down the middle aisle, like watching these, people that probably shouldn't have been doing what they were doing. And I'm looking at the movie theater and I walk back out and I'm like, I really don't think I'm supposed to be in that movie theater at age 14 quite yet. And they're like, oh yeah, we'll have you go behind the candy and we'll send someone else down there. So anyway, yeah, every day's an interesting day in the world, right?
Good first day. Good first day.
Unless you're scared to death of what you're seeing.
I'm not going to comment. All right, then you went and did a biomedical engineering degree at UC Berkeley. So I'll let you explain just a little bit about that, but there is a beginning of a story here that I want to explore a little bit later, or a theme, which is learning to thrive with second choices. You were looking at UC Davis.
Yep.
And
so
very unusual that UC Berkeley would be a runner-up program, but
I honestly don't know how to explain it, but yeah. So when I was going to college, my mom and dad, as I said, kind of let us do everything pretty independently. And so I didn't really, I mean, I knew of other schools outside of California, but I didn't really know of them that much. And I knew I couldn't get into Stanford or, I didn't think I'd be smart enough. So I thought, well, I'll just apply to the UC system. And when you apply to the UC system, then I don't know if it's still the case. You just ranked them. You just said, I want to go to, in my case, it was UC Davis first, Berkeley second, and Santa Cruz was third. And so I just, you mailed your applications in at that point. They didn't have the Common App like they do now. And so I got accepted as Mr. Jan Garfinkle into the College of Engineering at Berkeley. And I wanted to do pre-med. I thought I wanted to be a physician at that point. So I thought, well, I'll do, what am I going to do in engineering? I guess I'll try bioengineering because it's sort of pre-med, but with an engineering, it's sort of half engineering and half pre-med stuff. And so that's what I did. And there were two of us in the class. So it was half female, which was pretty cool. But and the other person, Noel Johnson, became a very good friend of mine because we basically took all our classes together. So it was great. I learned an awful lot. It was super hard. It was so hard. But I was really glad I did it.
Have you applied it in your subsequent career?
Well, so when I graduated, I wanted to get a job in it, I thought, but this is back in the dinosaur age. Berkeley had just started this as a program, as a way that you could major. It wasn't even a major before I got there. And so it was brand new. Medtronic was, I think it was still in the garage, of Earl. There just wasn't an industry yet. And so when I graduated, I had a chance to go learn how to make oil down with Exxon in Houston with these guys with cowboy hats and cowboy boots. And like, oh, that culturally doesn't quite fit with me. And then the other was to learn how to make Pampers. So I took a job with Procter & Gamble in Modesto. Still ended up with a lot of cowboys there, which was kind of interesting. Learned how to fish and stuff like that, which I didn't know how to do growing up in San Francisco before that. But it was, honestly, I love manufacturing. And while it's not really manufacturing a medical device, it was manufacturing something that would help humans with Pampers. And it was really funny because my first job was, so this is back in like 1979. Pampers at that point did not have tape on them. You used to have to safety pin them. So you'd put the diaper on and then you'd safety pin them. And so somebody came up with this idea that these taper machines would be a good idea. So my first job was as a process engineer. So I was 21. I was working with these two men who were in their 50s, who were, big guys. And, I was, very naive, very young, didn't know what I was doing, hadn't held a screwdriver or a wrench. Barely. I'd done a little, but not a lot. And we had to install these humongous taper machines over these very fast running paper manufacturing plants or lines. And so I did that for a year and then was promoted to production manager and worked newborn and toddler lines. There were 40 technicians reporting to me. And we worked rotating shifts. So we'd work graveyard one week, then swing the next, then days the next. And you can just imagine we never got into a good sleep cycle. It was horrible. But I learned so much about managing people and I love manufacturing. I just think that's sort of the heart of a company is manufacturing, really, figuring out how to get all the products together to get an end product out at the end of whatever the assembly line is. So, it was a great experience, but it wasn't biomedical engineering. And then I decided I really wanted to get into medical devices if I could. I love medical devices. No idea why, I just do. And so I decided I better go to business school to see if I can change industries and try and get into a real medical device company. And so that was my way of doing it, was to go to business school.
So you applied to 3 business schools, Northwestern, Columbia, and Wharton. And you were accepted immediately into 2 of them. which was Northwestern and Columbia. Can I ask, where did you get your degree from?
From Wharton.
So you have to explain that story, please.
Yeah. So I was waitlisted at Wharton, and I decided that I should make a trip back. I, born and raised in San Francisco. Now I live in Modesto for P&G. Like I traveled with my mom and dad. I hadn't traveled a lot at that point. So I thought I'll go to the East Coast and go visit these schools and see if I can talk to the dean while I'm at Wharton and see if I can help convince that person to let me in. So I went down to Wharton and had an interview with the dean. And I've so flubbed it. I just did a terrible job in it. I went in and I asked him, why I had been waitlisted. And he said, well, your English score is higher than your math score, and we're just not sure if you'll be able to do the math here at Wharton. And I said, I was like, I have an engineering degree from Berkeley. There's like no way this can be true. So I'm not very quick on my feet. And so I've tried to work on this over my life. But anyway, I couldn't come up with a good answer for it at that particular time. And then he said, well, do you have any questions for me? And I asked a few, softball questions to him. And he said, okay, that's it. It was a 2-minute interview. It was nothing. And I had an hour before I was going to be meeting a friend. So I ended up walking around the block a few times, and I came up with this, Jan, you have to go tell him what you really think, because you're never going to get in based on that interview, because it was terrible. So I went back and asked his secretary if I could please, see him again. And she called and he said, okay. And so I went, I just opened the door a little bit, and he was sitting really far away, and he was kind of a little man, and I'm kind of a tall woman, and it was awkward dynamics. But I just said, I really appreciated you telling me that you put me on the waiting list because my English score was higher than my math score. But I said, I have to tell you, I just did 4 years of, math for engineering. These were like, differential equations and these super complex, difficult levels of math for 4 years at Berkeley. In the College of Engineering. I said, there's no math that you can throw me in the business world that's not going to be more difficult than what I've just done for, while I was getting my engineering degree. And I said, if anything, I would hope you'd be happy that you would have one engineer coming in who does better in their English than they do in their math. And, I hope you'll let me in. And he just smiled like you're smiling. He said, well, call me tomorrow and I'll let you know. And I did get in. So that was good. Although, honestly, truth be told, I should have gone to Northwestern. That would have been a better fit for me. But, anyway, I wanted to go because I had an old boyfriend there, and I thought it'd be fun to be in school with him again. Silly.
No, not silly. Important. But I wasn't going to bring that bit up.
Oh. It's funny how we make decisions, isn't it, Andrew? It's not just about what's the best school or what's the best fit. I do think what's happening on the personal side matters just as much. And for me at that point, I still was pretty crazy about that guy. So I thought it'd be good to go back to school where he was.
I think that is a very important point, right? That these decisions are not linear always, right? And I think that is something that we talk a lot at Fogarty to our companies and also to the interns that come through is, the social component, the emotional component is tremendously important. So while you're at Wharton, you actually did an internship at Eli Lilly. And what were you doing in that internship?
Yeah, so Lilly deserves so much credit for being such a progressive pharma company. They were far ahead of where all the other pharma companies were at the time. And so they had a little group. It was just 5 individuals that was set off with the task to acquire to first evaluate, but then acquire medical device companies so that they could, Eli Lilly could broaden the impact of what they were doing in the healthcare space. And so I was their summer intern. Bill Hawkins was the first level. He had just graduated from Duke. He became the CEO of Medtronic. then was Jay Graff, who was at NEA and Physio Control, has had a very storied career. And then was Ron Dollins. So it was between Ron Dollins and me was only 4 levels. And it was only 5 of us. Okay, this is like summer of 83, I think it was. And so they asked me which one I wanted to work on. And I said angioplasty. And so I started doing a lot of, learning about it, reading, diligence, et cetera. And I can't remember exactly how this happened, but they had already heard about a couple companies that were in the angioplasty space. And there was one out in the Bay Area called Advanced Cardiovascular Systems, ACS. And so I started doing diligence on ACS, and I went to Ron and to Bill and Jay. Jay was my boss at the time, and said, I'm only a summer intern here, but I'm like, I think it would be really important for me to go out and meet John Simpson and learn about angioplasty with him. And they said, okay. And so I don't even remember how I got to John to make this. I pitched to him, but he said, fine, come on out. So I spent a week with him in the cath lab out at Sequoia at the time. He'd already left Stanford, and learned, a little bit about angioplasty, but, came out of that week going, oh my gosh, for patients that are cardiovascular, diseased patients, this will revolutionize what happens to them. Because you have to remember, Andrew, at that point, patients having heart attacks had 2 choices: take a nitro and pray that it relaxes the spasm, or go for a bypass procedure, which is a pretty horrific procedure. And what angioplasty did was stop the heart attack right then and there. The problem with angioplasty is the restenosis, et cetera, but we'll get to that because John had another idea for that later. But I just felt like for cardiovascular patients, this was really going to revolutionize. So after my week there, I went back to Ron and Jay and Bill and just said, this is going to be really important. This is big. We should really do a lot of diligence on ACS. And they said, great, let's start. And I only had a 10-week internship, so I had to go back and finish my MBA. And when I graduated, I had an offer to go back to Lilly to work there. But I really wanted to work at the startup, and they hadn't bought it. They were still deciding what to do. So I reached out to John and asked, if I could interview for a position there. And luckily they had one associate product manager opening. And so I interviewed with Bill Starling and was able to get a job at ACS. And I think I was employee roughly 19 or 20 or something in there. And so started there in 1984.
I just truly hope that folks that are listening to this appreciate how amazing that story is. Just the folks that you're working with, Hawkins, Ron Dollins, Jay Graff, Bill Starling, all, truly legends in our industry. So what a good way to start. And then also, ACS went on to become one of the more pivotal acquisitions in our industry. It was the beginning of a lot of the minimally invasive approach. So, and you were pivotal to that. I just love that. So go on, sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, it is amazing when you look back at like this summer internship basically makes my career. So you just, for young people, I think internships are super important. That's number one. And you need multiple ones. I just happen to get super lucky, like the perfect one the first time. But the other thing is the people that you work with help. The reason why it became my career was because those people came into my life and out of my life, even until today. And that was, 40 years ago now almost. And so it's super important to do your best work and to also advocate for yourself, and just to, if you find something that's super interesting, go after it, because, and I think on the flip side of this, Andrew, the other, I think, really important thing was Ron in particular, let a summer intern go talk to John Simpson. That was incredible that they would bestow that much responsibility on me. I could have totally flubbed it with him, and, that could have never happened. But when you're in a leadership position like you at Fogarty, like me at Arboretum, it's super important that we do give internships and give the interns opportunities to really excel and really own a project. If it's if it's a project that's not that meaningful, it won't be as important to that intern and they won't learn as much. But if you can give them some real responsibility, it can make a big difference.
Yeah, well, clearly made a big difference for you. I mean, I couldn't agree more with that to start with, but it's also that internship has affected many, many other lives. I think ACS obviously had a very exciting product, a very exciting platform, and would have been acquired regardless. But the fact that it was acquired by Lilly on its way to becoming Guidant, you had a key role there, an instrumental role there. So that it's just remarkable. And then having the guts giving up the opportunity to go and work with Ron at Eli Lilly, to go and take a flyer on a startup on the back home, but on the West Coast. Again, that takes bravery. So, congratulations. Good move.
I don't know if it was bravery. I love startups. I like smaller environments, although that was a small environment where Ron, that one little organization was, but Eli Lilly was huge. And one other, I think, really important lesson is I think when a person goes to a small company, you really get to learn how to get a product from concept all the way through to a sale. And it's difficult to do that in a big company. And I think it depends what people want to do long term. I wanted to ultimately run a company. I don't know why, I just thought that's what I wanted to do. And I needed to learn a lot. I mean, I knew a little bit about how to make Pampers. I knew a little bit about running movie theaters, but I didn't know anything else, so I needed to learn that. So the beauty of ACS was, gosh, in that time, I probably helped launch 20 different technologies, because, it's not just the balloon catheter, it's the guide wires and the inflation devices and the guiding catheter. It's all the stuff. And in the different roles I played I was there for 6 years. I got to experience a lot of different functions and a lot of different parts of how do you get a product from concept all the way through to a sale. And I think it's really important to learn that if you ever want to run a company, and that's what I wanted to do. So I was just really lucky that it was, a rocket ship taking off, and I was holding on, for dear life on that ride.
So next from ACS, then on to another, iconic company in our industry, sort of renowned for the number of leaders it's created, but DVI. So John Simpson, another Simpson company, asked you to write the business plan while you were working at ACS. Yeah.
So I was a sales rep at this point, and John was I called on Sequoia. So I got to know John really well. I mean, I got to know him obviously early days of ACS, but then even more so watching him in the cath lab a lot during the time I was a sales rep. Anyway, so he came up to me and just said, Jan, I'm going to start my next company, and it's going to be on atherectomy. I'm like, what's atherectomy? And, it's the shaving of the plaque out of the coronaries, because the problem with angioplasty is restenosis. And potentially we can lower restenosis if we can more gently, take the plaque out and not tear the artery wall, because that was sort of contributing to the restenosis that was happening. So I said, sure, I'd be happy to help write it. So ACS was bought about a year after I was there, and then DVI was bought about a year after I was there, both by Eli Lilly.
Might be a good idea to hire you into a lot more companies.
Well,
so all acquired by Eli Lilly, and then Eli Lilly spun that organization, or the combined organizations, off as Guidant. So we've had the good fortune to spend some time with Ginger, and she described, and we've heard this consistently, the culture at Guidant was special, and deliberately so. I mean, very well set up. Can you describe a little bit about your Guidant experience and how you saw the Guidant culture?
Well, I think it was honestly an extension of ACS and DVI. I mean, it wasn't. So Ron became CEO of ACS once they acquired it, a couple of years after. Ron Dollins is exceptional with people. He's just phenomenal with people. And he's exceptional in his belief that, and John Simpson has this too, that if you give people the skill set they need, they can accomplish pretty much anything. And so Ron, half the organization was women. And this is, this is not typical, honest, but Ron really believed in hiring the best. He believed in incredible communication. He backed his employees. I mean, Ron was that way. He was tremendous. And so, he was the architect acquiring ACS, acquiring DVI, acquiring these 8 other companies. I think it was in total, half on the plumbing side with ACS and DVI, and then half on what I would call the electrical side of the heart. And, with the IPO of Guidant, Ron became CEO of that. And again, just masterful in how he, grew a very large organization with 8 disparate or 10 disparate companies kind of coming together, bringing Ginger, on into the office of the CEO. It was a remarkable experience. I learned this lesson from Ron Dollins because I was a summer intern when they then bought ACS and he becomes CEO. He comes up to ACS and I hadn't reached out to him after I knew he was going to be CEO. He comes to ACS and Ron's not a very tall man. And when he walks, he snaps his fingers. So you always know when he's coming. He's like those little kids with the bicycles with the, the flags on the back of them. He's like that. You kind of know where he is because he's snapping his finger and he's walking with intent. He walks over to my cubicle and he goes, Jan. I'm like, Ron, I'm so excited to see you. I'm so glad you're here. He's like, I am so disappointed in you. You didn't even call me when you found out I was going to be CEO. I'm like,
wow.
I had no idea that would matter. This is Ron. Human relationships matter a tremendous amount to him. And I was so naive. I did not appreciate that. I did not understand that. And I learned, you got to do that. And B, you gotta learn these lessons early in life that the human relationship is the most important thing in business and not everything else. I mean, the rest all comes along, but it's that human relationship that really matters the most.
We hope that you enjoyed that special look into Jan's formative years in San Francisco, her role in getting Eli Lilly to acquire ACS and eventually Guidant, and the mentors she admired and learned from along the way. Please share this with your network. There are great lessons for all of us to learn. Thank you.